Welcome all to Babiker the Travelers podcast. This is the third episode. It's been like 3 or 4 months since the last one. I blame the organizer of this, the owner, I say, of this lovely place for that reason. But thanks to 3 months of waiting, we were able to have a nice set with nice equipment. So here we are. And with me is my guest, Erik Barry.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Did I get that right? Was it Barry or Barry?
Those sound identical to me the way you're... I don't know. There's Barry. Yeah, it's good.
Barry. Welcome. He is a traveling comedian originally from the United States. He's been strolling around Europe, I think, for about a year now.
More or less like a year and a half, yeah.
A year and a half. He's currently in Prague. Popped in for about a week, and yeah, I had a conversation with him the other day. He seems to have a very interesting, very fascinating background, and I really wanted to get into that. So first, let's just know a little bit more about you. So just give me a quick, personal introduction.
Sure. Yeah. I'm originally from San Francisco, California. I've been like a writer my whole life, but still have yet to find out how to actually make that into a career that I can survive in. And then I started doing comedy. I first started like 10 years ago, and then I did it for a couple of years, and I stopped for a long time. I was doing more like improv and sketch, and then kind of right before the pandemic started, got back into stand-up, and then obviously had to put that on hold for a long while. And once the pandemic started, decided to leave the United States, and I've been trying to kind of put my feet down here in Europe, but it's been tough. So I've been in several cities in that year and a half.
All right, interesting. So let's go way back. So let's say in school, like, were you like more interested in computer? No, what did you study in university?
In university, I was a theater major. So and
I didn't even know. Okay.
Yeah, and I was like focusing largely on playwriting. So I had my own theater company.
You end up in Google, but like, okay, let's go step by step. So you studied, you're a theater major.
I was a theater major, yeah, at UC Berkeley, and mainly doing like writing. I had my own theater company, so I wrote all the plays, and then I would act and direct in them as well. And we for instance, we went to the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh with one of the plays I had written.
Edinburgh.
Yeah, Edinburgh.
We're trying to fix his mispronunciations, but hey, it's fine. It's fine. You had your whole bit about pronunciations and mispronunciations.
Yeah. And so I actually got out of Berkeley very early. I graduated in 5 semesters.
Wow.
And
2 years and a half. That's very fast.
Yeah, and because the theater thing was going so well, I thought, I'm going to do this full time. And then I got out and realized it's really hard to make a living as a playwright. And I didn't have like the student loans that I was helping to finance the theater company with anymore. And had to get like a corporate job. Yeah. So it's fun. So Google was the first place I worked at. And it's so funny when people are like, how's a theater major work at Google? It's like, I don't know. Do people think that an entire business just runs on computer programmers? Like, there are other positions that need to be filled than computer programmer.
What positions are designed for a theater major? I don't know. Like that. I mean, what?
Well, I don't know if this is like a thing that exists outside the United States where people are like, well, this was what your major is, so I guess you're gonna live and die doing that thing you studied. But for instance, I worked in the advertising department there, and it was like.
So you applied for advertising position?
It wasn't it was just within so AdWords is like how they mainly make their money. It was within that department, but it was actually working for their legal team. And they had like copyright, anytime like you couldn't make a ad for if you had like a bottled water company and it said like, just do it. 'Cause that's Nike's copy, or anything. And so we worked on a automated program that was like helping to flag copyright issues with their AdWords program. So actually very boring, to be honest.
Yeah, that sounds It's very, very far removed from anything you would have possibly studied, I guess, or like skill you would have developed.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of theater majors end up going into sales and stuff like that because they want people who are charismatic and high emotional intelligence and, being able to work with people like that. But I mean, and then eventually I did get into actual advertising as like a copywriter. So, I mean, writing ads and
even when you were studying, like, I guess theater, it was mainly writing. So writing plays.
They didn't offer, it wasn't as like robust of a program for playwriting. That's what I wanted to focus on. That's what I was doing like in my personal life. But, I mean, I did like took acting and directing classes and like stage lighting and, working like the soundboard and stuff, which is like how I started to be able to know how to work around some of this, editing software and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess like how was your time at Google? Like because this is a very long time ago. Like what year did you get into Google? Like how?
I believe I started in December 2006.
December 2006.
Yeah.
So like 1 year after they acquired YouTube, like.
Yeah.
Golden age, man.
Yeah, actually, Sheryl Sandberg, like the COO of Facebook, had an office that was like, 15 meters down from where I was sitting, because she was at Google at the time, and was known for being very mean and yelling at people. Yeah, it was back when I think startups had this like luster of like, ooh, look, you get to ride a scooter down the hallway and there's like a ball pit and free food and you get your haircut there and your oil changed. And everyone thought that meant that was like a good company. In reality, it's like they never wanted you to leave the office. You know what I mean? Like that was their way of, we don't want you to take a lunch break and go somewhere else to eat. We want you to eat right here so that you can eat at your desk and all this other kind of stuff. Same thing with like, not so long ago, I mean, I'll say kind of pre-Google, most offices had like cubicles or offices. Yeah. You had your own little space. Yeah, and like it encourages creativity, so you can. And that's literally like they've done every study. It's the exact opposite of that. Like it's so much more distracting when you have someone sitting or like you're trying to like eat a sandwich and someone's sitting across from you just staring at your face. Like it's makes you all self-conscious and stuff. The reality is they just want to pack as many people in as possible and save money.
But it's a lot more social when it's open. It's like so easy. I mean, I remember when I worked in an office, like there was so much. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but like there was so much opportunity to socialize with people all the time. And like we ended up, I don't know if that's kind of like the point. It's like to be, I don't know, like to be talking with people from the office all the time.
I don't know. It just shows that it dramatically like decreases productivity. And
it most definitely does. Like I would say, as someone who has experienced like work in the office and work from home, like work from home is infinitely more. Like if you're just looking at the productivity, it's like. Yeah, I can do a lot more at home because I don't have to chat with people. Right? Like you only talk to people when you need to when you're at home, right?
Right.
So it's like it's literally the definition of productivity. So, yeah. But then, well, I guess it begs the question of like, is our open offices like better than closed offices? Well, now that's even. I think that's not even the question people are having. Now the real debate is, I guess, work from home versus.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's one thing that sticks from this pandemic.
Because, it's sticking.
Well, I don't know, because I've been like I have my eye on a lot of jobs in the U.S. and like, they're like, oh, we're going fully virtual, and then like as soon as like people thought, the first time people thought the pandemic was kind of ending, they're like, just kidding, everyone's going to come back in 2 months, and like.
But they've been saying that for a while. Right?
Well, but then because the pandemic's not ending, like I just hope that. It's so unnecessary, especially like, right, it's expensive if you want to live like central in a city. Yes. And so then if you don't, there's people who are commuting like, an hour one way or whatever. And it's like, that is not a good use of anyone's time. And it's stressful. And so I do hope that the virtual thing sticks. It's nice in the EU. I mean, I guess the United States is the same thing, like in terms of state to state, but like, yeah, like the idea that I could potentially work for like a German company while living in Czech Republic. Yeah, that's appealing.
Even even in the EU, it's not as easy as you might think. Especially for full-time positions. Like if it's part-time, it's more or less you can get away with it for the most part. But especially for full-time, and if you're spending like, I think there's like a whole limit. Like, hey, if you're spending more than 1 month outside of the country that you're working full-time, that kind of raises a lot of question marks. In terms of like taxes, in terms of like all of this shit. So like that really complicates things.
Yeah, I've had that happen with a couple of US jobs where they're like, no, don't worry, we're fully remote. And I'm like, cool, I'm in Berlin. And they're like, oh, just kidding. Because of the tax thing, you know.
It is like a big headache for companies, but it's also a big headache, I guess, for governments. Like they don't really know how to tax.
Yeah.
How can I tax you if you're not living in my country?
Yeah.
What right do I? Well, other than the U.S., the U.S. can do that and does that all the time. But other countries kind of struggle.
Yeah.
To enforce that. But anyways, I think we went on quite a big of a tangent. The point so you worked at Google for how long?
I was just on a contract there for I think 6 months, and then ended up switching to a startup in San Francisco, and did that same thing contract for like 3 months, and then like I finally got like a salaried permanent position at an advertising agency.
Right. And how long did you work in that place?
Like a year and 9 months or something. It was right when like the 2008 like crash was happening, and I saw people getting laid off all around me, and I figured it was just a matter of time before it happened to me. So I like proactively actually found another job and left the company. My boss was like, his eyes like bugged out, because in this economy at the time where everyone was clinging desperately to their jobs, the idea that I quit,
you were going ahead of the curve and leaving a job.
I was on a sinking ship though, you know, so like I knew I had to. Yeah.
It's always amazing like that. Like employees of the company can tell like when the company's doing good.
Yeah.
Make the moves, start making the moves themselves.
Yeah.
And so, you got this other job, but you worked there, I assume. So it was the same kind of position?
No, this was working. I was working in like print production, and the main client was like, so every time you see a label on like the label on this drink or whatever, like there's certain colors that they're like trying to print this to, or like knowing the material that sticks to the bottle, and you know, making sure that the photo looks right, like all this kind of stuff. Honestly, it was very boring. All these are very boring jobs.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, but it paid a lot, and again, I thought I was going to get fired from the other job, so I jumped to that, and then
I mean, from the looks of it, I guess you didn't really have what you would call a consistent career, like in one thing. You were kind of just jumping around.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was working like in advertising and marketing. I mean, those are,
I guess, in the same departments you could do, let's say.
Yeah, and then eventually got into advertising as a copywriter, and that's been, you know, creative director, that kind of thing. Like that's been fairly consistent, I'll say.
So what time did you like start that?
Well, I mean, so I was at the advertising agency after I left Google, and that they won like a bunch of awards, like very creative place. Nice. They started, I don't know if you guys know it over here, but it's the most famous ad campaign in the history of the United States, called Got Milk. And if you've ever seen like T-shirts or anything that like say "Got Milk" with a question mark or anything like,
I think I've heard of this. It's more or less like as a meme than, I don't know if it's Got Milk. What was this an advertisement for?
For this milk for
Got Milk.
I think it was like the California Fluid Milk Processors Board. I don't know, some organization that produces milk. But they were like very funny, very creative commercials, and it started. You know, went on for years and years and years. And memes and all that kind of stuff came out of that. So then I first really started working as a copywriter, though, in Chicago. And I think that was like in 2014. Wow.
Chicago. It's going to jump from San Francisco, right?
Yeah, it's like a 4-hour flight. I left in January 2014. And I had already seen San Francisco change so much from like this cool, artsy, creative, independent city to like just being overrun with tech, and becoming really like stripping out a lot of the character and like creativity from the city, and it just becoming like prohibitively expensive.
But like, it's crazy the amount of people that, well, I guess it's just the way inflation works, but the amount of people that have moved to San Francisco and like the amount of trouble, the problems that you hear, even as someone who's, I haven't even been to the US, the fact that I know like the like fucking overpopulation and homeless problems in San Francisco like, is a testament to how many people want to live there, how many people are moving, how many people, and like, I mean, that's why it's so expensive. It's prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is San Francisco has rent control, so meaning once you're locked in, your landlord can't raise the rent more than, I think, annually, more than the whatever the
inflation
national interest rate is, I think.
No, national interest. Okay. That's interesting. It's very different.
So like, for instance, and then, you know, if you're in like a shared flat, you move in, you're under the lease of the original person, so you're like a subtenant. So like when I moved in, actually I'll just say when I moved out, I had a huge, massive room. I mean, really big, overlooking the street on Haight Street. It was like beautiful, and my rent was like $535. You know, not this like $4,000 thing you hear. So it's kind of like there's no middle ground. Like when you first move into an apartment, it's so expensive. Now, if you stay in that apartment for 10 years, your rent's not going to go up at all. So then it becomes like. So you have, I mean, there's
so like over 10 years you won't pay that much, but like presuming you
I mean, there's people there though, like who've lived in their same apartment for like 30 years or whatever, you know, and they're like, that's their home.
That's the dream, huh?
I mean, you know, if they're happy where they are, but yeah, I mean, so it's a tricky thing. And then like with the home, there are homeless people everywhere, but most of those are not San Franciscans who are homeless. It's people who were homeless who came to San Francisco because the city has good social services, because like in Chicago, if you're homeless, you would die in the winter. Do you know what I mean? It's like whatever, you know, negative 10 Celsius or whatever. Like, so whereas in San Francisco, like it's not hot like Los Angeles, but like you can like survive outside. And I mean, Los Angeles has a homeless problem too, but like California is like, if you have to choose a state to be homeless in, it's not the best.
It's one of the best.
Yeah, you know, like, so a lot of people they call them like train hoppers. Like they'll hop on trains and travel across the U.S. to come to California. Yeah.
Yeah, I just hear about the homeless problem. I never cared to think about like what the reason is. Like, I mean, at least one of the. We're really diverging though from where I wanted to focus. I don't mean this literally, but fuck the homeless. So where did I want to talk? Yeah. So okay. So you worked in creative directing for a while, and but so how did you move from that to like here? So I'm trying to connect the dot. Yeah.
So I started doing stand-up in San Francisco.
Okay. What year did you start?
I started the day Steve Jobs died. Which I think it was October 6, 2011. No.
That's one way to remember a day. It's the day this famous guy died. Okay.
I just remember the hackiest jokes myself and everyone else was making. It was like the, you know, introducing the I don't have pancreatic cancer or something, or like, you know, curing pancreatic cancer. There's not an app for that, you know. It's just like,
we're actually making these jokes like on the death.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was, but yeah.
Yeah, comedians have zero mercy. Okay, zero chill. All right. So, what was? I mean, this is for me. This is probably the part where I'll stay on the most. But like, what inspired you to start comedy? Did you just hop in?
I've loved comedy since I was a kid. Like, performing or otherwise. Like, I've always been. Sorry, I have like chips all over me. Comedy nerd. Like, when my parents were, they would watch David Letterman, like the talk show, which I loved. But this would come on at like 11:30 at night. And I was supposed to be asleep in bed. And I remember like sneaking in my parents' room, like crawling on the floor and like watching it. Like, just cracking up. Like I grew up in like the golden age when like The Simpsons was amazing. This kind of stuff. So I always was obsessed with comedy, and I've always been a writer, and I've always written funny things, but I didn't know. It seems so unattainable to be a professional comedian or to do comedy. Like I didn't know how do you do that? How do you get started? So it wasn't till I discovered, like I never heard of like open mics or anything. And then once I discovered that,
you just randomly ran into like an open mic club and you're like, let's do it.
Yeah, San Francisco had a bunch. Actually, it's quite famous. Like it'll come up on podcasts and stuff. But this place called The Brainwash, and it was a laundromat that did comedy. So people would be washing their clothes.
I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a cafe built in, but like what a weird concept. And they actually went out of business a couple of years ago, sadly. But like, there's like, I mean, famous comedians who like got their start there, and yeah.
Laundromat. Okay.
Yeah, and Facebook actually helped a lot because then you started having like groups. Like there's the Bay Area Comedy Network, which is, that lists all the mics and all that kind of stuff. And kind of, if you can imagine like a pre-Facebook era. That stuff wasn't, how would you know? You had to be word of mouth or whatever. So, and then you start meeting comedians, you start seeing how they're performing, and you kind of think, okay, I can do better than that or whatever.
And then you're like, fuck it, let's try.
Yeah. I loved it. And continued doing.
It's a lot harder to like get into the scene in the US than it is here.
Well, I mean, being successful, whatever that means, like, I mean, it's highly competitive there, but anybody can go to an open mic and perform, and they're everywhere. Like,
well, I've heard stories. I think Julia said this, like she would go to open mics where like you would have like 2 minutes to like speak, or like you have to pay to be a part of the open mic. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's the 2 minutes. I've never seen 2 minutes. I've seen 3 minutes. I've seen 3 minutes, and it's because there's so many people that are interested in doing it. Like at that Brainwash thing, for instance, like I think they'd open up the signups at like 4 p.m. and the show wouldn't start till 7, and so it's like you're getting there 3 hours earlier to sign up, and then you could get there at 4 and you're 15th in line, and now it's like so it gets exhausting in that way. It takes a lot of time. And then
imagine listening to like 20 comedians on the same night.
Yeah, I mean, in New York is the only place I've been that has paid mics in Manhattan, and that sucks because you're paying at 3 p.m. where there's nobody to be in like a basement of a bar. It's only just other comedians, and you're paying $5, or you have to buy a drink or something to perform to people who aren't interested in hearing you, and
get out, bro.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I guess it's good that like if you make the comedians laugh, because they're not paying attention, they're just looking at their notes and whatever, you have something solid,
True, because it's so competitive. If you can stand out in the environment, like
and it's just people aren't interested in hearing you. They've probably seen you perform 100 times before. They're not interested in hearing you try out your jokes. So what's nice about Europe is like you can get an audience of real people. Do you know what I mean? I mean, honestly,
that's an open mic.
Yeah, that's hard to do, especially in New York. That's hard to do. But I think what we're seeing now, well, when I say now, I mean like the last 10, 15 years. But like the idea of producing your own shows at like one-off nights at bars and stuff. Like you don't have to go to a comedy club. You can go to a bar and produce your own show.
Just do your own comedy. Yeah. It is amazing that like now it's so common. Like you go to any city, any big city, let's say in Europe, and like they probably have some form of English comedy scene, which is insane when you think about it.
I was shocked because I was trying to figure out where to go after Berlin. I'll try to connect the dots, but like. I'm like looking at like Bucharest and stuff, and it's like, there's like an English speaking comedy scene there. And then I've been talking with comedians in Europe, and even in places where there's not a consistent scene, if you were to bring an English speaking show there, like they're like, it's people really, will turn out there. It's like this whole, like, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. So that's encouraging. And that's something that I think you don't see in the US, which is really nice about here.
Yeah. I guess they're like, well, the scene is much bigger. It's a lot more established. It's just a lot more competitive. So, but like you do still like, I mean, in the US you can already go to any city, even sometimes like small towns, and they'll have, you know, their bar will have like a comedy scene or a place for a comedian to chill at. There's this one like American comedian that I follow, Steve Hofstetter. Mm-hmm. But this guy, like, he sort of makes a joke about going, and like every time he would go to a new small town, he would just make fun of that town, and then like every small town would have like its own rivalry where like they're proud that they're like maybe 10 people bigger than the next town, and it's it's crazy. Like, that places that small in the US would even have such a thing. So like definitely the US is still ahead of like Europe in that sense. I doubt you can go to the smallest town in Czech Republic and find a scene. But
I think like there's more opportunity to carve your own path here. You know, and the U.S. has comedy clubs, which is good in some ways. I don't know. It's kind of like the difference between like having I can't think of a good example. Like I was gonna say like a network like picking up your television show. Versus
somewhat similar.
Making your own YouTube series, you know.
Because the thing is, the scenes here is something I didn't realize until recently. But the comedy scene here is incredibly like people run and not really institution or like network run, I guess. Which is like you literally just like you meet some guy like one time at a show. He invites you over to his show in his city, and that's it. Now you know, and then that's the only way things happen. Like I've met, you know, here in Prague, I've met a couple of people from Germany. They've invited me. A couple of people from Amsterdam. They've invited me. A couple of people from Portugal or Barcelona or whatever. Yeah. And that's just how. Because of the ease of travel and everyone moving around all the time, you really do get like a chance to connect with the comedy scene all over Europe.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome. For sure. Like
how many places have you been since you've been from here?
So I never performed out of it. So I was in San Francisco performing comedy. Then I left to 2014. Started doing stand up in Chicago, which is like a totally different vibe to the scene. And they're known for being like a big improv and sketch city. And eventually, like I started getting into that as well.
You did improv?
Yeah, I did. Actually started improv in San Francisco at a place called Endgames, and then
there's an improv club here.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I haven't.
So hook you up, improv.
I mean, I find improv to be super fun to do, and I think
it looks so fucking hard. I don't know how people do it. I look at people and it's like they fucking have to rhyme on the spot. I'm like,
well, that's like maybe like short form improv versus long form, which is like more like world building and scene building and stuff. And I find that to be super fun to do. I actually think it's easier.
Wow.
Because you don't get judged as hard. Like you can just come up with some stupid thing on the spot, and people will eat it up. You know, they'll die laughing. Whereas, like, as we could see, as evidenced by my performance last night, you can really die on stage as a comedian. You know, and it's such an ego blow in a way that improv is not. It doesn't have. I think people in improv are also generally healthier. They know how to work with people. You know, there's a give and take, an emotional stability that's not as prevalent in stand-up comedy. But yeah, I did that, and then I moved to New York, and then was there for 3 years. And just towards the end, I did improv also in New York, but then towards the end, got back into stand-up. So then pandemic. Decided I was done with the U.S. I thought Trump was going to get reelected. I wasn't into that. And comedy was dead in New York City. And so decided to try to move to Germany. And that became this
long... Wait. I'm going to have to stop you right there.
Yeah.
What do you mean by comedy is dead in New York City?
Well, during the pandemic, I mean, everything was closed. Like, you couldn't,
Comedy was dead everywhere.
Yeah, but I mean, that was what was the point? I was coming up on a year of my lease, and I had to figure out if I wanted to renew my lease. And I was like, what is the point of staying in this expensive city? I didn't have a job at the time, and so I decided, I'm going to give Europe a shot. And that's that I'm still on that journey now to like figure out where I'm going to land. But Berlin has been like, I guess like the home base of sorts. But so on the journey to get to Berlin, because there were no flights from the U.S. to Berlin
Directly,
I went through Barcelona and I stayed there for what was supposed to be 8 days. Performed comedy there, the Comedy Clubhouse, and then
the comedians at Barcelona are amazing.
Yeah, and ended up getting, even though I was vaccinated, ended up getting COVID in Barcelona. Nice. Either gave it to or got it from Matthew Murtha, who's a comedian there who runs the Comedy Clubhouse. So we both had to quarantine, and so I had to cancel my flight to Berlin. I had to stay there like another 8 days or whatever it was. So that was the first time that I ever performed outside the United States, is where I'm going with that. And then performed in Berlin and
for a while.
Yeah, and then it was really only this last 5 or 6 weeks when I couldn't find housing in Berlin and took a train to go through Central Europe that I started performing all these other places.
Actually, where did you meet Julia?
Here. I met her at the London Underground. Oh. Yeah, at a show, and we were both on the same show, but I didn't see her perform and she didn't see me perform, but we just... Yeah,
they still knew each other enough to apparently house one another.
She needed someone to watch her cats, and I didn't have housing, and so she said, "Well, maybe it could work for you to stay at my place," and so that's kind of how that happened. But yeah, so now for me it's super cool because I can say I've performed, in many places in the U.S., but like in Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, and hopefully Spain, hopefully more places to be added to that.
To come, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, so I guess this is just to understand the U.S. scene a bit more. So, like, do comedians travel nearly as often in the U.S. as they do here?
No. If you're a professional comedian, yes. Or if you're like trying to get... you can just do it kind of for fun or whatever, but like most people have like their city that they live in, and that's kind of where they perform. And then it's like a big deal. Like if you're quote unquote trying to make it, you either move to New York or Los Angeles, because that's where the industry is. And that's something that I think is not here in Europe, apart from London, but that I think there's potential to develop, which is an industry, which basically kind of means television, but like, or, Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's why people move to New York or LA. It's because that's where that stuff is. And that's how you can make a living.
Fair enough. But the thing is, I think it's probably, even though I guess it's easier to get your boots off the ground here and just get into the scene, get an audience, get a few shows. I think it's a lot harder to like, I guess, reach the top, or it's even, I would say the top isn't really that high here than it is, I guess, in the US. It's like when you ask me who's the biggest European comedian, like I can tell you the biggest one I've met, and yeah, he's like doing a bit better than us. Like it's not that.
Who?
Do you know Tamer Katan?
Oh yeah.
Like he's probably the biggest one like I've met. But like I've only been in the comedy scene for like what 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since July this year. Wait, that's 7 months. Holy shit, man. Time flies.
Yeah, there's that I have encountered or I'm aware of. There's like maybe 10 comedians I've encountered in Europe who are like making a living doing it. Like,
yeah, making a living. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 here in Prague that are making a living. But like when you say making a living, it's like, like I probably make more of a living working like basic introductory IT job than they are, but
yeah,
like it's still amazing that you can make a living.
I mean, and that's something that I think that's what when I say opportunity, like that I think is if I can use the word easier to do here than in the US.
Yeah, for sure. Like just to like that kind of like just basic living. Yeah, but there are by no means Dave Chappelle's in Europe, like big. Or like who's the other guy? No, the bigger guy, Kevin Hart. There we go.
I think every country has its like two or like. I mean, I'm leaving like I'm leaving like the UK and Ireland out of this just because they're like English speaking, and that does make a difference. Like, but like I know like France has like 2 or 3 like big comedians, and Germany has like 2 like big. I mean, these are people. I think he's not even a stand-up. Like this guy Jan Boomerman, and he has like a super popular podcast and like news, like kind of like the Daily Show but for German. And then there's like one other guy I think who got a Netflix special. But like even Germans will say like the most famous German comedian is not that funny. Like, you know, and like these are I'm not saying that. I can't even understand, you know, I can't understand it. But these are Germans that are saying that. And so I also think that that's potentially why you see like a lot of popularity with like English speaking comedy is like Germans will say, like, for instance, there's not as much flexibility in the German language as there is in English. So it's not that Germans are inherently less funny. It's that the language doesn't.
The language fucking sucks.
Well, like for instance, like the verb always has to come at the end of the sentence. So you have to structure your jokes where
the verb is at the end.
Yeah. And that affects how you can play with language and all that stuff. English is like a sloppier language, you know, so you can like play with it more.
Anything works, anything goes.
Yeah.
I never actually thought of that.
Yeah.
But like, I guess it does make sense because I know an Egyptian comedian.
Yeah.
Who was very big in Egypt. And Egypt is sort of like the heart of the Arab world. So anyone who gets popular in Egypt gets popular in Saudi, Syria, and all the other Arab countries. But this, like, he was pretty much like the biggest, I forget his name. He was pretty much the biggest, like, Egyptian comedian for a while. But then he tried to get into English and he just kind of sucked.
Yeah.
And he was complaining that, like, the English language is actually, like, it was for him, it was like, it was much harder. It was like, like I'm used to, like, Arabic has maybe the opposite of German. It's like so many ways you can play with words, and it's very easy to, just sounds weird, but it's very easy to rhyme with Arabic.
Okay.
And so it's like if you're even just a little bit good, you can like make every joke rhyme.
Okay.
It becomes almost like a
like lyrical,
like people who are good with words sound like they're always like poets. Like like it sounds natural to them.
Sure.
And that lyrical like effects is like it's hard to. Needless to say, like it's hard to achieve in your own language. So to step into another language and it's not that hard to rhyme in English, but it's definitely harder than in Arabic. So
yeah. I mean, there are non-native English speaking comedians who I think like their brain and their writing is super funny, and I'm not saying this to be like, you know, American exceptionalism or like anything kind of like ethnocentric or whatever, but I'm just being honest as like a comedy guy. They are fighting a huge uphill battle, not because they are not like funny in their soul, but
Basim Youssef. Fuck, I just remembered his name. Okay,
what's his name?
Basim Youssef.
Basim Youssef. Okay,
he came on the Daily Show once.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe I've heard this name before. But these people, when English isn't their native language, just like the intonation of how to speak, and like literally sometimes like they'll say something really funny and the audience doesn't laugh because they genuinely don't understand what the person said, you know? And that's like so sad. Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's not that. And
I see it so much here. It's actually, oh my God, I just remembered. So on like maybe the first or second time I went to a stand-up, right? There was this one Czech guy who clearly was struggling with English. But this guy, like, it wasn't even the words he was saying, but just and this is the problem. It's like the way he was saying things was so fucking funny, and he can tell. And like that's the thing, he made like the audience laughed more during his set than during any other comedian set. But it wasn't because of his.
Right.
It was such a bad feeling because you could tell that people were laughing because his English was funny, and he could tell them. And like he literally like got angry towards the end. He was like, "Why are you laughing?"
Yeah.
But it's like it's exactly what you say. It's like what can you do for a person? Like
well, so there's a comedian. She's super funny in Berlin named Moni Zhang, and she's Chinese, and she sounds super fucking Chinese. But she plays that to her, and she's aware of like the stereotypes of like the kind of what's like the docile but like you know, like the domesticated shy Asian woman, whatever, and she plays that because she contrasts to that with what she says, and she says it in like, I don't know how else to say, like she says it in this very Chinese way, like the intonation, whatever, but then what comes out of her mouth is like the most horrendous like stuff, and so it's you know, it's very unexpected when you and so she knows how to like use her manner of speaking in a very funny way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that works for like every language, but like.
Oh my God! Now you just reminded me. I assume you're familiar with Bo Burnham.
Yeah, of course.
He has one of his songs. He has like this line, which is like, "Stand-up comedy is actually very easy. If you're a Chinese comic, just stand up and do a Chinese accent, because everyone laughs at the Chinese accent."
I'm not familiar with this song, but yeah.
It's like, because silently they thought your people were laughable, and now you gave them an excuse to express it in public. It's like, oh, that's there's Bo.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, people can take that difficulty or those accents that you might think are limiting and play that too. I would say Christina here in Prague is one of those people. I mean, her English isn't bad per se, but her accent is very strong, and she really does a good way of not being ashamed of it, and like just playing it up in some places. So I don't know if you've heard this one of her jokes, but like she goes like, she's putting her profile, her dating profile on Tinder and Grindr. But she doesn't say it Grindr. She says it like Tinder and Grinder, and it's just fucking much. It's a lot more funny because of that.
Yeah.
To great success on both platforms.
Yeah, it's a pretty good Christina impression,
right?
Oh,
I love it.
Yeah, is it the one where she says she's like, I've gained some weight, so I use this picture from 1997.
That is not a good Christina impression.
That
is all right.
This is I look like a little boy.
Yeah. There you go. I love Christina. She's amazing. Imagine if she hears this, she's like, "You pieces of shit! I'm never inviting you again." But no, that's fine. But yeah. All right. So now doing comedy, I assume you're not making that much money off of it yet.
I'm making nothing. I don't want the last.
You don't have to tell us you're broke, bro. But no, that's fine. But the plan is to eventually.
Yeah, I mean that's been the plan for a long time. But how to do that? I mean, and I'm not the only person who's like, would love that, but doesn't know how to make it happen. But I feel like I see, like I'm a very like self-producer, self-starter guy. I had my first podcast in April 2012. Like,
holy shit.
Yeah.
But I assume it's not the same one that's on now.
Yeah, no, I got sued by a porn company.
Holy fuck, bro, what? I thought you just got lazy like everyone else. I thought you got sued. Okay.
No, I got sued.
Yikes, bro, US is scared.
Yeah, actually 3 of the 4 people from this it was a porn company that sued me, are now in prison. Thank God.
Holy fuck, bro. Okay. Let me go into this story. Like, what the fuck?
Sure. At a certain point, I wasn't legally allowed to say anything, but fuck those guys. They are horrible people who are in prison, and I think a judge would recognize that now. Basically, I'm a writer, and I used to write about sex and dating, and I had a podcast about sex and dating.
Okay.
And there was this story where this girl, this 18-year-old, was crowned like Miss Teen Delaware, like some beauty pageant thing. And immediately after she was crowned, it came out that like 4 months before she had done porn. And everyone was writing like, "Oh, I thought she was the girl next door. Isn't this horrible that she did porn?" And like, I'm a very pro like sex worker rights guy, and like I don't think there should be any shame around any of that stuff. And the company, like the porn company that she had worked for, like started saying like, "Look, see, Miss Teen Delaware, blah blah blah." And I thought it was super screwed up that they were exploiting, like
profiting off of the fact that she won that beauty contest.
Yeah, and also like one of the agreements in any upstanding porn company is that the reason when they use stage names and stuff is because men are creepy and will stalk them, and just for career things. So the idea that they were outing her with her real name and all that stuff, I thought was super messed up. And so as I started like to look into this company, I was like, wait, this reminds me of, I'd see these ads on Craigslist like back in the day where they'd be like looking for models 18 to 22, no experience necessary.
How'd they get you in?
Yeah. No experience necessary, $1,500, must send photos of this and that. And it wasn't saying porn, it was saying modeling. I'm like, what model? Like, this sounds so shady. And it was years before. And then when I started looking at the company that had outed this girl, I'm like, this sounds like super familiar to this other thing. And like, I started researching and I found out that it was the same company that was like, had this like shell company for models that was like using them to like, snare them into, is that a word? Ensnare? I don't know. Anyway, bring them into,
snare, that's the verb.
Thanks.
To put a snare, yeah.
Yeah.
A snare is a trap, by the way.
Yes.
Ensnare is the trap.
Yeah.
It's correct.
And so I ended up finding out there was a company, and I found out that they like had all this illegal shit. They were tied to like Russian arms dealers, like all this kind of stuff. It's the only time, like, I'm not a journalist. I've never said I was a journalist, but I did a investigative journalism piece into this, and I outed them on this website I was writing for, and then like my other buddy who is a professional movie critic and writer picked up that story and put it out. And so anyway, what would happen is when you would they would recruit girls through this company called Bubblegum Casting, and if you Googled is Bubblegum Casting legitimate, they had paid all this like for like SEO stuff, all these people to write like fake, I had a great experience across all these blogs, so that's what would show up until I wrote my piece. And I knew SEO stuff, so it said bubblegum casting, aka girls do porn, a shady blah blah blah. Like, so anytime people were questioning bubblegum casting, my thing would come up, which was bad for their business. And so they sued me for defamation, which was not true, but they had tens of millions of dollars, and I was just like a fucking blogger. And so basically I had to get $5,000 together to hire a lawyer just to make it go away, which meant I had to agree to never say what I just said and remove the article and any podcasts that were associated with that. But they launched, it's called a black hat SEO attack. Like, they hired some company in Pakistan to to link literally 2 million web pages linking into my site that were like Erik Barry child molester, Erik Barry rapist, like all this kind of stuff, which for Google's SEO lowers your ranking and whatever. Anyway, I had to it tanked my numbers on the podcast, and I had to stop doing that. And dude, they were hiring private investigators to follow me, literally banging on my door at night. They called my work where I was working at the time in Chicago, and they wouldn't leave their name or anything. But with the receptionist, she's like, Erik, someone wanted to leave a message for you. They wouldn't say who they were or where they're calling from. And they just said the message is, the curtains are closed. I was like, what? And that day, I was running late to work, and I hadn't opened my curtains. So I left my curtains closed to my bedroom. So they were letting me know that they were looking outside my, it was creepy as hell, man.
God.
So the good part of the story is, fast forward 3 years later, I'm living in New York, and I get a call from a lawyer, and he's like, can we talk about, and I'm so scared of these people. I'm like, is this legit?
Needless to say, being a little scared.
Yeah. And there was a lawyer who had seen my article before it was removed, and I was getting messages from women who'd worked for them that were like, thank you for writing this. They're creepy, whatever. They put together a class action lawsuit, and eventually a legal, the Department of Justice, I think, in the United States, got involved because they were kidnapping women. They wouldn't let them leave the room until they fucked all the guys. They said that it was just going to appear on a DVD in Australia and would never go on the internet, all this stuff. 3 of the 4 guys are in prison right now, and the other one is on the lam. They think hiding in New Zealand somewhere. The main guy, Michael Pratt, is his name. Anyway, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it was intense, man. It was, but they were brought to justice.
I definitely didn't expect, of all the segues I thought this might go into. It's investigative German journalism, espionage. I don't know,
If you Google girls do porn, you'll see all these media outlets now have written about them and all the shady stuff. I'm not the only guy who knows about this now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, now it's common knowledge, but you were one of the people who
I literally was. No one had, and it was just through coincidence of remembering this old Craigslist ads that I would see. And then, yeah.
I don't know. the first crusader against the porn industry in a way.
No, and the thing is, like, I'm not anti-porn at all. I'm like very
not porn, but like let's just say, I don't know, the evil side of the adult industry.
I'm just I'm anti-kidnapping and raping women. Like, you know, like bold stance there, but like, yeah, no, they're super shady.
But that's the thing. It's like I think all of these pretty much, like you just outed like one company, but I think since then almost every big company in that industry has some of that side into it. Like even mainstream Pornhub or like any of these other ones, like you see the deals that they do with the women that they try to hire, the way they hire them, like you hear very similar.
Well, the mainstream industry got pretty, like, in like the 60s and 70s, it was like run by the mafia and shit, and then like it got actually legit like in the 90s and 2000s, and then like I mean, you would have agents and managers, and like it was like being, in that sense, it was like being like an actor, and you would agree what you're going to do in the scene, what you're not going to do in the scene, like very professional actually. I would argue that with technology, with iPhones and video cameras and all this stuff that people could have at home, then it got super shady, because they're not beholden to in any industry when they're creating their own stuff. Yeah, they can invite or abuse them, whatever, and who's
to stop them.
Yeah, and now it's kind of going the other way again, where a lot of and I mean, I'm obviously focusing on just like straight, the women's side of like straight porn and stuff, but like now you can have just like have an OnlyFans and like not even have to deal with anybody you don't want to. You can either be by yourself or have your boyfriend or whoever. Like, so now it's kind of swinging the other way, where now it's back in the creator's control. I don't know that there's as much money to be made doing it. Like in the 90s and 2000s, like you could be a legit celebrity, like porn star, and like be put in like mainstream movies, and like you were like a celebrity, you know? I don't think that really exists now with like the OnlyFans thing, but yeah.
Well, I think there are celebrities that go on to make OnlyFans and make a lot of money. But yeah, the other way around is not very common.
Yeah.
True. Well,
a crazy wolf, man. I love the names of the energy drinks that.
Yeah, this is very cheap, but it's like 20 crowns.
Okay. I still am
You could get like 5 of those.
I'm very bad at like the currency conversion
thing. Yeah, it's so weird. Like the crowns are so weird to convert to. It's a very weird currency to get used to. But like now, after a year here, I'm a little bit used to it.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So like at least let's. I think in the career journey we filled up most of the holes. So I guess. Well, I mean, so what are your? I mean, I guess what, like if you haven't mentioned anything about your current status, like mention it.
I have been struggling to find. I mean, that's partially why I left the United States, because nothing was keeping me there. Like, I had gotten laid off from a job in New York, very unexpectedly, and at that point, I decided to just travel for the first time. Like, I'd always wanted to go to Thailand. I'd never been. And so what was supposed to be like, and I booked it like 6 days later, like super unexpected. I started off in Vietnam. I didn't know it was like their New Year celebration, and like U.S. citizens need to get visas approved to get to Vietnam. And like it was literally by like 10 minutes before the office was closing that I like got it done online. And then ended up turning that into like a 3.5 month trip through Southeast Asia. And that was like what kind of like whet my palate for traveling and like exposed me to like all these other cultures, and was like, oh man. And I was 32 or 33 when that happened. I'm like,
so wait, before 32 you never left the US?
No, I had like left the US, but we don't, you know, with like the holiday time we're given and stuff, and like how long of a flight it is to get from like, you know, like the first place I went was actually was Edinburgh. And when I was a kid I went to like Mexico and Canada, but I don't remember that.
Yeah. I mean the small trips, I guess that you know barely register, especially like if we're talking like just a week over, like that. I wouldn't consider those travel, you know, like a tourist week, like whatever.
Yeah, but that's all we have. Like, so yeah, I mean,
so
I went.
This was your first like long-term trip, I guess.
Yeah. Now and then I was going to come back to New York and get a job, and that proved to be way harder, and like I wasn't getting hired, and struggling with that. And then the pandemic happened, and the pandemic actually saved me in a way, because it extended my like unemployment insurance, and like we were given.
I hear so many stories about like people getting saved by the pandemic.
I really did, dude. Like I was in Ecuador actually when it actually really hit, like in March 2020, and I was getting money in my U.S. account from because I'm like a U.S. citizen and I was living in New York, but like I was stuck kind of in Ecuador where I was at a hostel and I was paying like I don't know if you have like a sense of the dollar, but like I was paying like $3.50 cents. Yeah, okay. My English is a night, and which is insanely cheap at this hostel. And meanwhile, I was getting paid by the government like $1,200 a week. So I was making like almost $5,000 like a month.
That's a
you
good
know
salary.
what I mean? Yeah,
That's not bad.
And like and so that I was able to save money, which is how eventually when I made the leap to Europe, like I had savings to go off. That savings is basically non-existent anymore, and I desperately need a job. And I was trying to do that in Berlin, but the housing situation, like it's just this massive complicated thing. So now I'm trying to see if I can just work in a bar or cafe in Lisbon is the next place. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I think if you'll find a job, inshallah.
Or if I can do what if I can produce shows like, and just I don't need to be rich or anything, but just
Get off.
survive. Yeah.
Yeah. You can. You're heading in that direction. I would say you're definitely closer than me to getting to that point.
I produced shows. I produced a weekly showcase when I first started in San Francisco for 2 years, and then I also produced two monthly shows in Chicago. None of those were enough to make money though.
I saw your shorts on YouTube. They're getting quite a bit of views.
Which I don't know.
The last one you posted was like 2,000 views, I think, or 3,000. I don't know.
Wait, just the one of me doing comedy?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't checked that. That's cool. I didn't know that.
It's doing really good. Yeah, I remember just looking at it. I was like, damn, this guy's shorts are doing really good. Like,
dude, I literally didn't know that. That's cool.
Here's the good news.
You know, because when I put my podcast on YouTube, it gets nothing, and so I just
Yeah, but that's a podcast.
I know.
Don't fucking watch it.
So I didn't think to look at it, man. That's so funny. All right, cool.
It's funny that happened here too. Yeah, it's crazy. Like sometimes I would like look back at a video I posted to YouTube like 5 years ago, and just suddenly it'd be like 5,000 more views. Which is like, it would be like 5 views before that. Yeah. So it's like it'd be a big surprise.
The most successful videos I've had through the years are ones where I was never trying to like literally there was
the dumbest shit.
I had a thing called a ganglion cyst, which is like a cyst under and it like won't go away, but they call it a Bible bump because one of the ways to like get it to go down is you take a Bible or the heaviest book in the house and smash it. And so I took a video. It's so funny of my roommate smashing my and like, but I'm not. And I uploaded it just because I thought it was interesting and funny. Like not to like get I don't even know if I was doing comedy at the time. And like those are the videos, or like I had like dental work done, and like that's the kind of stuff because people want to research that stuff that gets all the hits.
Yeah, man. YouTube's a weird place.
Yeah.
I have technically, well, I don't use it anymore, but like I had a channel where like I was really into anime or very specific. The fuck? Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's good now. I was really into like one specific anime, and I made a whole show about comparing the fictional characters in this anime to like their real life counterparts, because like it's fictional characters based off of like characters in history and whatever. But I made like a whole series just about that show.
Yeah.
And I did that for like 5 years.
Wow.
But like when I say I did that for 5 years, I did like one episode.
Yeah.
So I have 5 videos.
Yeah.
But like I remember like towards the end I was like, I hate this show now.
Yeah.
So I can't make, like when I first started I was like, man, I love this shit.
Yeah.
But like towards the end I was like, man, I hate this shit. I can't keep making stuff for this now that I hate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, now I have to. So my lesson from that was, if you ever want to make a YouTube channel, like, try to make it about yourself or about something that's more flexible than a show that you liked once.
Yeah, I mean, but then I also hear like the opposite in the sense that like you want to be highly specialized. So like for instance, actually, and I really enjoy watching it. It's kind of maybe that says something about me. But when I was living in New York, my first place, we had mice in the walls, and I was going crazy. Like, are these rats? Are these mice?
You had the mice in the walls.
Yeah, and
I like how you just said that so casually.
I later at a different place did have rats in the walls, and they died, and you can smell the carcass like rotting. I started watching this YouTube channel called Mousetrap Mondays, and all it is this guy showing various mouse traps on, and now people send him like custom built, like 3D printed mouse traps. He's making a huge living just filming various mouse and rat traps. Highly specialized.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like that's highly specialized, but it's about him. It's not like, well, I guess it does depend. For me, it's just if you can continue to like that specialty, that's kind of what matters, right? Like as long, I mean, that's like I liked that show for 5 years, so that's definitely a long time. But then, like when I grew tired of it, I was like, well, no more. Well, my first podcast, I didn't start it very far from you. I think I started 2013, 2014, around that time. It was one of the I think it was like the second podcast about Japanese visual novels, which is a genre of video games. Anyways, but like I liked those for a while, and like that had quite a bit of views. But then I stopped liking those visual novels, and now it's just like it's like a whole podcast channel out there that no one likes, or like that I don't update. But like that's why. I mean, it's one of the reasons I started this one. Is like this one's just a little more general. It's just, hey, if I decide to quit comedy next week, which I'm not gonna do, but like if I do, I could just talk to whoever the next guy I meet in whatever I care about next. So it's just a lot more flexible, right?
Sure.
I mean, so when did you start your current podcast?
I've had like bad podcast luck. So I first started it in October or November of 2020, and it was originally called An American in Berlin. And I was trying to go like more specialized, like what is it like to be living in Berlin? Let's get into like weird like German culture stuff, and like I still like the concept of that, but literally like the lockdown happened in Germany, and it was like I was new to Germany, so like meeting people, knowing what's what, like it became very difficult. I wasn't aware at the time of like, and actually this is like, I wasn't aware of like really how to work on like Zoom interviews and all that kind of stuff, editing software, like. I was just not up to date. It'd been a long time since I'd messed around with that stuff. Then I couldn't find housing the first time I tried to move to Berlin. It was like now January 2021. And I decided like, okay, I'm getting my master's, and it's like all the classes are online. I don't need to be in Berlin. I can't find housing. It's cold. It's dark. It's locked down.
You're getting a master's?
Yeah, that's how I was able to get into Europe, is because, there's a whole thing. I was in
like how you went over everything, but like you just forgot to mention that you're also doing your master's.
I was gonna move to Germany, but we got banned. Like I was gonna move August 2020, and then July 2020 they were like, "Hey, just kidding, everyone's banned from America, from the US." And so there was like 4 countries that were accepting us because our COVID levels were so high. And one of the countries was Albania. So I moved to Albania.
That's why I was like, why the fuck did this guy go to Albania? When I first told me, I was like, why'd you go to Albania?
So I moved to Albania.
I see why.
I moved to Albania, and I was like looking at getting like a lease for a year. But while I was, when I was in Ecuador and eventually could get a flight back to the US, like Houston, it was either Houston or Miami that they flew into. So I went to Houston, and rather than fly again from Houston to New York, I decided to rent a car. And I took a trip through like the deep south, like 34-person town in Alabama, like scary stuff where I knew I was never going to go otherwise, but I like to expose myself to like weird cultures other than mine. And so I drove from Texas like over a month all the way up through all these states up to New York, and then was going to move to Germany, but we got banned. So I moved to Albania. But in that process, when I was in New Orleans on that car trip, I applied for a master's in Germany, and I thought, I hear it's free to get a master's there, and that could be cool. That could help with some visa stuff. And they were very late because of the pandemic, like letting students know. So I was already in Albania, and then I got this email. I was like, congratulations.
You got accepted?
Yeah. And then I was like, is it in person or not? And they're like, no, it's definitely going to be in person. So then I was with that student status, was able to move to Germany, and then like 1 week after we started class, like, just kidding, it's all online. So like I actually could have stayed in Albania and saved a bunch of money, like, you know.
Yeah, dude, I'd imagine like renting in a place like Albania is very, very cheap. I mean, I assume you were looking at the prices and shit.
Yeah. For short-term stuff, and especially if they know like you're like a Western, not local person, they'll charge you way more. But like if I was to get like a year lease and commit to that, it is cheaper. But once I got it, got the student status, I went to Berlin. Then 3 months there, couldn't find housing. Decided like, okay, what's the place that's like in the same general time zone that would be cheaper and warmer? And so Turkey came up, and so then I moved to Turkey for 3 months. I thought I had a 6-month visa, but it turns out you can only stay there 3 months as a U.S. person. So and then the vaccine came out in the U.S. and my mom was turning 70. So I had to leave Turkey no matter what. And I said, well, where do I go next? I said, you know what, I'm going to fly back to the U.S. and get vaccinated and celebrate my mom's birthday. And then I was there for 3 months, and then Barcelona, Berlin.
Yeah, the hippity hoppity.
It's been, dude, yeah, I've put a lot of like pins in the map in the last, year and a half or whatever.
Yeah. What I tried to do this recently because I also got asked like where did you grow up, and I had to do your whole same hippity hoppity. We went here and then we went here and then back there. And so there's one app. Well, it's not app. It's on Google Maps. You could do this thing where you can map out your trips like that you had in the past, and you can add names and addresses and like houses. So like if you want to keep track of where you've been, it's a good way.
I have that. Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I get like the monthly roundup. I'm really excited for December because it's been like Germany and like all around. It actually makes me sad because I didn't. You have to like turn on like enable Google location. Maps, yeah.
And location GPS.
Yeah, and which one drains your battery a whole bunch, but like two, like I didn't have it on the whole time. So like there's places like when I was in Puerto Rico or just other like in Mexico or whatever, like that aren't on there, and that makes me sad. But like I can't trace back exactly where.
Yeah.
But it's so helpful because like I'll have friends like, oh, I'm in Nice, France for the weekend. I'm like, dude, you got to go to this restaurant, and I can literally go back to August 6th, 2018. Okay, this is the name of the restaurant.
You can remember, I once used that to remember a place that I had gone to like last month. But yeah,
it helps. It helps to, if you're a drinker, and you're like, wait, where was I last night? And then you can.
Where the fuck was I last night?
Yeah.
Where am I right now?
Yeah.
Google Maps.
Yeah.
Oh god. Yeah. All right. I think. Well, I guess the last question is like, what are your current plans for the future? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? No, not that. That's an annoying question. I mean, like, just in general, what are your plans for the future?
Well, the immediate thing is I'm gonna be doing like for my master's. I'm gonna be doing an Erasmus in Lisbon.
Oh, that's where you're going to.
Yeah, but part of it too is like it'll just be easier to find housing in Lisbon than Berlin, and like the struggle, it's so stressful in Berlin where you're just getting these sublets through this website called like Wege gesucht. You have to have a email alert on, and then you message the person, hey, I'm really interested, but they're getting 500 messages, so 9 out of you don't get they don't get back to you, and so let's say you finally find a place. And it's only for 3 weeks. Like the day that you step foot into that apartment, you have to be looking for your next place, So you're just living out of a backpack, and it's so stressful. And so even, if I can find housing for 4.5, 5 months in Lisbon, that'll just be like such a relief to not have to think about that, But I'll be doing that. And then I'm hoping to I would like to actually, I don't know what the scene is over there, but I would like to start comedy, like produce comedy shows there. And, I want to figure out how to make a living doing that, but I also want to put together like a proper hour. And I think I have the material. I just need to create a through line, like what leads to what. And then I would love to, it would be very sweet for me to go back to the Fringe Festival. I was there 2005, like however many years later, and then go as a comedian and premiere that hour there. That would be really cool.
Awesome. You already have like an hour of material sorted out.
Yeah, I wouldn't say sorted out. I've done. So the longest.
What's the longest you've done? Yeah.
The longest I've done was 43 minutes.
Wow. Okay, so you definitely have an hour.
Yeah, and that 43 minutes, by the way, was like 10 years ago or like 9 years ago. So like Yeah.
Is it very common to do long shows in the US? Like,
no. I mean, if you become like a headliner, I was headlining a show in like this Northern California town, and she just said, she's like, yeah, I mean, can you do 25 minutes? And I was like, can I do longer? And she's like, just do as much as you want. So that's why I say 43 minutes, because I know exactly how long it was. But yeah, I mean, I did the longest I've done since I started again was probably a month ago, and in Berlin I did I did 20 minutes. But that's not because I was out of material. That was because that's how much I got the light. Like I think I got it. But then I have nights like last night where I'm like, oh my god, like
it happens sometimes where it's alright.
Yeah.
Yesterday I did feel that the audience was like not the easiest, but yeah. You could have also done better. Hey, no, it's fine. Shit happens,
half the stuff was like new. I had just done at the open mic the couple days before, and I do need to like work that stuff out. But I thought it was still in a good enough place that it was gonna. And then my stuff that I had done before that like usually always works didn't work.
Yeah, and that hurts the most. Like when you do a bit that's always works, then suddenly it doesn't. You're like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, I did the whatever my supposed huge viral video on YouTube. I haven't but like I did and like that didn't really work. Like I was like, geez, man, like.
Well.
Yeah.
It's all right, bro.
Thanks, man.
Things will
Appreciate
work out.
it. Yeah.
Your video did get a lot of views.
All right, I gotta check it.
You're gonna go back home. You're gonna look at this like, damn. I love that feeling.
Keep refreshing. Like that.
Oh, but maybe all those 2,000 views were yours refreshing. But
yeah,
maybe that was just me refreshing too. I could give you this whole moment on the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's awesome. I wish you the best in this career and in other careers, in all of your careers.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And you too.
It was awesome getting to know you. And yeah, I think I'm supposed to have an outro. Well, you have your own podcast, so I guess I will probably link to it. I mean, if this is a video, somewhere here and somewhere down in the description elsewhere. What's your podcast called?
It's called Erik on the World.
Yeah, Erik on the World. Erik on the World. I actually enjoyed his podcast. Like, a lot of people are like, "Yeah, I have a podcast," and then you listen to it, and it's like, okay. But like, no, you're actually like interesting to listen to. So, check him out, Erik on the World. He's a fun guy. Give him some views. He needs it. It's alright. Subscribe, everything. It's on Spotify and everything, right? Or just
it's on all the things.
It's on all the things.
Yeah.
On all the things. I will link to all the things. And yeah, that's all. See you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.